It just seems that the economy does better under the Democrats than the Republicans. Now, it shouldn't be that way. But if you go back, it just seems that the economy does better under the Democrats. Certainly we had some very good economies under Democrats as well as Republicans. But we've had some pretty bad disaster under the Republicans.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Econ and Decon. I appreciate you joining me. This is part 2 of our 2024 election series. Last time we talked about Donald Trump's record and what we can understand from him from his record. Today we're going to be discussing his 2024 platform and policies, as well as whether or not he's actually a conservative. Let's dive right in. The promises and campaign platform we're going to discuss come directly from his campaign website, which the link is in the description. And again, like last episode, we're really going to put a special emphasis on the issues that are important to this channel, namely economics and war and propaganda. Number 1 is abolishing the income tax. Now, Trump has not actually promised this, but he has spoken favorably about it. He first floated the idea when he was speaking to a libertarian convention, so that plays pretty well in that crowd. But he also has said several things recently about what a good idea that would be. Now, I actually think this would be a good idea. I think this would be a great thing for the country. In fact, the income tax is unconstitutional. That's why the first iteration of it was struck down by the Supreme Court in 1896. This would be a great policy, in my opinion. However, Donald Trump is not going to do it. If you watch the first video, you know that there was a lot of very bombastic promises that he made that were in this direction: getting rid of the deficit, getting rid of the debt. The penny plan, auditing the Federal Reserve. This is in that same vein of things that he promises that appeals to a lot of people, but it's not going to happen. Even if he knew how to do it, even if he really wanted to do it, he's not going to do it. There's nothing in his record that says that he is willing to even attempt this kind of radical change. Next is the no tax on tips. Again, I think this is a no-brainer. This is obviously a good idea. I've actually never talked to anybody who doesn't think this is a good idea. That's why Kamala actually copied the policy. So when we do our Kamala review, it'll be on her list also. I think it's a good policy. I think he might actually do it. This is doable for sure. With very little pushback, it is popular. There's very little, if any, downside to this.
I'm very sorry the government taxes their tips. That's fucked up. That ain't my fault. If you show me a piece of paper that says the government shouldn't do that, I'll sign it. Put it to a vote, I'll vote for it. But what I won't do is play ball.
Next, Trump has on his campaign website that he is going to abolish warrantless surveillance of American citizens. I think this would be a great step. I think this is something that should have the Patriot Act should have never been signed, but this is something that needed to be abolished ever since that was signed into law and the government got the right to spy on us without a warrant. The problem is that Donald Trump is the one that signed the continuation of this bill in 2018. He wasn't even against this until it was explicitly used against him. Again, based on his record, I have mixed feelings over whether or not I believe he's actually going to do it, but he was certainly in favor of it as recently as 2018. But it is an evil law that is robbing you of your freedom. This is not a power the government should have. So I at least agree with what he's saying here. Also on Trump's campaign website is ending inflation. Now, this is something that is a hard pill for a lot of people on the right to swallow, but we had inflation under Trump. If you watch some of my earlier videos, you know that the CPI has always been understating inflation, but we did have inflation under Trump, and he said it was the greatest economy ever. So he's not really looking to end inflation. He's at most looking to bring it down. But again, Donald Trump loves to blame Joe Biden for all this inflation. If you look at the actual inflation, it almost all has occurred under Joe Biden. But if you watched my first video in the inflation series where we discussed where inflation comes from, we talked about how raising the monetary supply while shutting down production is how you get massive inflation. The first person to do that was Donald Trump with the CARES Act. The fact that it didn't have an effect until Joe Biden took office is exactly what you would expect. But all of the things everybody hates about how much money Joe Biden printed and how he kept the economy shut down and how many things he did to cause inflation, Donald Trump did exactly the same things before he left office. Now, we will have another video on the CARES Act and on the COVID crisis and whether or not it made sense, but certainly his actions were part of what led to the inflation. And he will not accept that. He will not take credit for that. All he does is push it on Biden. But if we're being honest, the first domino to fall was pushed over by Donald Trump.
But she caught me on the counter.
That wasn't me.
Saw me kissing on the sofa.
That wasn't me.
Next on Donald Trump's website, he has that he's going to fight to protect and save Social Security. Now, exactly what he means by that is unclear, because Social Security is contributing to our debt, and it is an albatross hanging around our neck. It is actually it's kind of bankrupting us. Medicare and Social Security are bankrupting us, and it's not a secret why. This is our most socialist program in our entire country. In fact, Social Security is too socialist for Sweden. Okay, Sweden privatized their Social Security system about 20 years ago. This is an incredibly socialist system. I don't believe it should be saved. Number one, because it is basically a socialist Ponzi scheme. And if you don't agree with me, we are going to do a Social Security video very soon where we will look at this in depth. But it is a socialist Ponzi scheme that is bankrupting us. It is not viable in the future. There is no way to keep it going without major cuts to benefits or major increases on the taxes. And that is what has essentially happened every few years since the 60s or the 70s, is they found a way to lower the benefits or increase the taxes. Again, I understand that a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people paid into that. It's a difficult issue as far as how to phase it out, but it is certainly not a conservative program. It is a program that will either die, be phased out, or bankrupt us totally. Again, video forthcoming. Next, Trump promises to strengthen and modernize our military. Now, agreed, some modernization could take place, but this is a bit of a dog whistle for the defense contractors and for the military-industrial complex. This is him saying we're going to spend more money on the military, which I promise you is not necessary. As people have pointed out in the past, we could cut our military budget in half and actually double our defense. Most of our money is being spent not on defense, but on offense. So when Trump says he wants to strengthen and modernize our military, what he means is he wants to spend more money on it. But are we actually in danger? The truth is that we spend more than 3 times as much on our military as China, who's number 2 on the global list. We blow everybody else out of the water. In fact, if you look at the so-called axis of evil right now, we spend twice as much per year on our military as Russia, China, Iran, Syria, and North Korea combined. Okay, like 10 years ago, I believe it was in 2013, Russia and China did the largest joint naval exercise in world history. The entire Russian naval fleet and the entire Chinese naval fleet did a military exercise east of Japan, and their combined navies were smaller than our Pacific fleet. Now, keep in mind, we have a fleet in Central and South America. We have an Atlantic fleet. We have an entire fleet in the Middle East. Nobody's threatening us. Nobody really wants war with us already. We are spending enough, I promise you. As I think everybody should be aware by now, when the government says defense spending, what they actually mean is offense spending.
Oops. Well, you say we try that one again, huh?
You don't get 900 military bases in 135 other countries by playing defense. Lastly, this is something that is not on Trump's campaign website, but it is something that's worth touching on when we talk about his platform. You will see a lot of attacks on Donald Trump from the left where they're saying
Project 2025. Those are Donald Trump's plans.
Donald Trump's Project 2025 is unhinged. It's crazy. Donald Trump's 2025 agenda is
to make Donald Trump the most powerful president ever.
A brief note on Project 2025. It is, in parts, unhinged. Okay? Project 2025, that document is dangerous. And I don't agree with it. But it is very clearly not Donald Trump's plan. Okay, I believe it came from the Heritage Foundation, which is basically a think tank. They said these are the things that should happen starting in 20. That's what they want. But the think tanks come out with plans like this all the time. There are probably dozens of think tanks that are working in the Republican direction. This is not something that Donald Trump has ever endorsed, this Project 2025. In fact, he has said explicitly, this is not my plan. I agree with some things in it. I disagree with other plans in it. Now, Donald Trump hasn't said exactly what he agrees with and what he doesn't agree with within the plan, but it's not his plan. And anybody that tells you Donald Trump's 2025 plan is purposely lying to you. Stop listening to these people. Whatever you think about the plan, and I disagree with a large portion of it from what I understand, it's simply not his plan. And to say so is a bold-faced lie.
Project 2025. Those are Donald Trump's plans.
Last thing we want to talk about with Donald Trump before we wrap up and move to Kamala Harris is Donald Trump a conservative? This is a question that's worth asking if you look at his record. So let's review a couple of key points. Donald Trump claimed that Bill Clinton wrote a terrible law when he wrote NAFTA. He said it was a bad deal that took a lot of jobs away from America. I don't necessarily disagree with that. In fact, I'm a believer that specifically if you're conservative, you don't need 10,000-page documents for free trade. You just need the government to stay out of it. Okay? There was never really a free trade agreement. But Donald Trump campaigned against it, saying that it had all these problems, that it was shipping. But then Donald Trump reworked the deal into an identical deal. He did not change one meaningful thing about the deal. He just renamed it and put his own stamp on it. He did the same deal Bill Clinton did, and it's not conservative. Next is tariffs. Now, I have mixed feelings about tariffs because in the time in this country when I thought our government was governing best, we didn't have an income tax. The entire government was funded through tariffs. Now, I think if that's the way you're doing it, I think funding your government through tariffs is a better way to do it, a more constitutional way to do it than funding it through the income tax. The problem is, as we discussed earlier, that Donald Trump is not going to abolish the income tax. In fact, other than like corporate tax rates and capital gains tax rates, he's not going to lower the tax rates very substantially. We've seen that from his first term. So if you're keeping the income tax and the sales tax and all these other little taxes you have, but you're just adding tariffs, that is not a conservative policy. All you're doing is adding taxes to the American people. Donald Trump loves to talk about China is going to pay. China is going to pay tariffs. That is a lie. That's not how tariffs work. Tariffs are a tax on the American people. They increase the cost of the goods you buy. The idea is that they help Americans because they bring jobs back overseas, but they bring jobs back overseas by raising the cost of everything so that you might as well buy a domestic product because everything is more expensive. So what you're doing is you're helping 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 people who are now getting jobs, but you're hurting 300 million consumers who buy that product. Whatever you think of tariffs, they are not a conservative policy. They are protectionist. They are anti-free trade. They raise the cost of living for all Americans. They are a tax on Americans. So when Donald Trump says that it is a tax on China, he is lying. Or at least he is trying to make a point in a very unclear way. China won't pay $1. They might lose some jobs, some money might come back over here, but they are a tax on Americans, and they hurt the lower class Americans typically more than they hurt higher class Americans. This is not historically a conservative policy, and in my opinion, one of the craziest things about Donald Trump is that he has gotten a country full of conservatives to cheer for tariffs.
Impressive. Very nice.
Tariffs are protectionism. That's what conservatives used to call tariffs. Protectionism is not conservative. Next, circling back to the CARES Act. Again, video forthcoming, but there is a lot of back and forth. It's a difficult gray area situation when you have an issue like COVID. But from 30,000-foot view, printing trillions of dollars, giving the vast majority of it to corporate interests and banks, and then forcibly shutting down businesses are not conservative policies. Not even close.
Saw me kissing on the sofa.
That wasn't me.
We can argue all day about whether you think it was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but it was not the conservative thing to do. Next is Obamacare. Donald Trump showed his hand a little bit in Obamacare. Now, Donald Trump talked about Obamacare and how terrible it was. And to be honest with you, it actually is terrible. In fact, it's kind of a far-right program. It's one of the most fascist programs we have, because essentially what it is a government mandate that you have to buy a product from a private company. That is as fascist as anything I've ever heard. Okay, so when Donald Trump was asked about Obamacare, his response was always something like,
we're going to be submitting a plan. It'll be repeal and replace. It will be essentially simultaneously. And we're going to get a health bill passed. We're going to get health care taken care of in this country.
well, I haven't quite figured out what to replace it with. We have to get rid of it, and then we'll figure out how to replace it. That's not the conservative answer. If you believe in conservative economics at all, the answer is to remove it and replace it with nothing. If you believe in the free market, then you believe that the free market can handle healthcare better than the government can. But Donald Trump's plan was to kick the can down the road and then come up with a plan later. Okay, the moment at which Donald Trump is saying that he's going to come up with a plan is the moment he's not a conservative on the issue. The answer is remove it, remove the government from healthcare, and replace it with nothing. That has been the conservative answer for 100 years, since the government started getting involved in healthcare. We do not have a capitalist free market healthcare system right now. And again, video forthcoming on that. But the answer is to if you remove a cancer, what do you replace it with? Nothing. That's the answer. And Donald Trump couldn't find it in 6 years. He still can't find it. Next, as we discussed in the previous video where we were talking about the deficit and the debt, Donald Trump increased spending every year. Now, again, I know some people don't think that's a big deal because Ronald Reagan did that as well, and everybody loves him on the conservative side, but that's not conservative. Okay, conservatives have always said we don't have a taxation problem, we have a spending problem. The problem is not the tax code, which is a problem, but the reason we're getting bankrupted, the reason we have this inflation, the problems with economic and income inequality in this country are related to spending. And the drag on the economy from the government is spending. That has always been the conservative answer. It's always been the free market answer. But it's not Donald Trump's answer. Donald Trump increased spending every year. He ran the largest deficits of any president in history, and that was pre-COVID. I don't see any evidence that he actually cares about cutting spending. If you've noticed the slant of these first few points we've made, Donald Trump is not very conservative, but Donald Trump is a conservative when it comes to abortion. That is an issue. It is the only issue I can find where he is clearly a conservative and where everything he's done has been conservative. This channel makes no judgment on that issue. Not my bag, not my expertise. You make your own judgment. But for the sake of being fair, that is the only issue that he is clearly a conservative on. The truth is that Donald Trump's closest historical comp, and it's not even close, is Bill Clinton.
I mean, we are the same person.
Now, Bill Clinton was somewhat conservative when it came to his economic approach. Now, part of that is because he had a heavily Republican Congress, and he listened to them and he worked with them, and they did some good things in the economy. And I agree that Donald Trump did some good things in the economy as well. But Donald Trump is a 90s Democrat. That's what he is. He's not a conservative. He's not a historical Republican. He is the second coming of Bill Clinton, right down to the sexual deviancy. Now, the crazy thing is that 1992 Bill Clinton would probably have to run as a Republican today because the Democratic Party has certainly shifted, but so has the Republican Party. The fact is that these words, conservative and liberal, have kind of gotten jumbled up, and neither one of them means what they used to mean. Is regime change truly conservative? No. Is increasing spending truly conservative? No. But every Republican for 40 years has done those things. In the same way, are lockdowns liberal? Clearly not. But that's what liberals do these days and support. These words have lost meaning in a way, but the point is that Donald Trump, on any issue other than abortion, is a 90s Democrat. He is not a conservative. We mentioned in the last video Javier Milei, and I'm going to do a video on him soon. This is the recently elected president of Argentina who is making drastic, drain the swamp type changes in Argentina. And a lot of people compare Javier Milei to Donald Trump, but the truth is that Donald Trump is closer to Kamala Harris than he is to Javier Milei. Sorry.
I mean, we are the same person.
Se acabó el curro de la política. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
For this reason and many more, I am afraid that Donald Trump might be a fraud.
As far as single payer, it works in Canada. It works incredibly well in Scotland.
Hillary Clinton, I think, is a terrific woman. I mean, I'm a little biased because I've known her for years.
Yeah, I know her very well. She's very talented. And
I live in New York. She lives in New York. And I've known her and her husband for years, and I really like them both a lot.
Do you identify more as a Democrat or a Republican?
Well, you'd be shocked if I said that in many cases I probably identify more as a Democrat.
Then why are you a Republican?
I have no idea.
That's about all I have for this episode. I know a lot of people probably aren't going to love that because a lot of people think he's the lesser of two evils. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. But I'm here to tell you that he's part of the evil. That's how I feel anyway. We are in the late stages of empire. We are a declining empire. That is clear. We are on the Titanic. And Donald Trump is rearranging the deck chairs. Okay? He's not even talking about the iceberg. I see no evidence that he's a threat to the military-industrial complex. I see no evidence that he's a threat to the banking system that is bankrupting this country and increasing income inequality and wealth inequality every single year. I see no evidence that he even has a firm handle on these issues. He is not going to save us. At best, he might slow the bleeding. But he is not going to save the Republic. I'm sorry. That's all we got for you today. That wraps us up. I appreciate you stopping by. Join us next time. We should have a couple of Kamala videos coming out very soon where we compare her record and her platform to those of Donald Trump that we've just discussed. So stay tuned. I think you'll enjoy those ones. And until next time, this is Econ and Decon signing out. Peace.